Hello, everyone. My name is Melanie Blake, and I'm the Director of Classical Pursuits. I'm here today with David Saussy, one of our leaders at Classical Pursuits and a co-founder and president of Symposium Great Books, also a teacher, tutor, musician, all kinds of other things. And David is here today to talk a little bit about our upcoming seminar starting November 8th, Shakuntala in Indian Classical Poetry and Drama. And you might think, who is Shakuntala and what is Indian classical poetry? And you're going to hear a little bit about that and get to know David. And we hope very much that you will consider his seminar. So David, you've mentioned to me a couple times that Kalidasa, the author of the Shakuntala plays, is considered, he can be considered a kind of Shakespeare of India. Can you say more about what you mean?
Yes, absolutely. Kalidasa wrote a play called The Recognition of Shakuntala, or Shakuntala, and he lived about 1,000 years or more after the original source of that story, which was in the Mahabharata, the great classic poem that's comparable to, say, the Iliad and the Odyssey, and even whatever other classical sources of poetry we have. Ovid, for example, in the Roman world. And so Kalidasa, first of all, the way he's often compared to Shakespeare, first of all, is that he's immensely popular, has wide name recognition in the world of Hindu poetics and drama. I was just actually on a road trip not too long ago with my 10-year-old son, and he often, while we pass the time on the road trip, he often likes to dig up facts and figures, about the world and geography, because that's what he's learning. And I learned that, I guess I had an idea that this was the case, but I learned that there are 1.3 billion people on Earth who are from India, which is a lot of people. And so, that's a lot of people. And Kalidasa, I can't claim that all 1.3 billion people in India know the name of Kalidasa, but Kalidasa has that kind of impact for nearly 1/8 of the planet, or the population of the planet. And so he has a pretty big name, on Earth, if you look at it in that perspective, from kind of global perspective. But the more kind of powerful point of comparison is the way Shakespeare himself drew on sources such as Ovid, as you know, and Plutarch as well in his historical plays. One of the great questions that we often go to Shakespeare in comparing, his reading of those classical sources is what does he retain? What does he conserve from those classical sources? What does he add of his own? Like what, images and ideas and ways of framing some of the fundamental conflicts that arise that we see in the stories of, for example, Caesar and Plutarch, or in some of the stories in the Metamorphoses. What does he add of his own? What genius of Shakespeare is adding to the classical sources? And the same thing is true with Kalidasa, who lived, again, as I was saying, about 1,000 years or more after the original source. One of the exciting things about this class is we're going to be taking a look at, you'll have the opportunity to have a direct experience of both of those sources. So you'll read the original Shakuntala story in the Mahabharata, and then you'll read the Kalidasa retelling in the play. Okay. And we'll engage in part of our conversation is going to compare and contrast to see like what did Kalidasa conserve and what did he add of his own? What did he change? And so those are the two main ways in which Shakespeare and Kalidasa are comparable. Fun fact, Goethe, the drama, everybody knows Goethe with Goethe's Faust. Goethe was both a huge fan of Shakespeare. Shakespeare made a profound impact on his life and thought.
Right.
And he also was a great lover of Kalidasa's Shakuntala figure and poem as well. So there's an interesting way in which Shakespeare and Kalidasa come together in Goethe's writing. So.
Oh, wow. And a quick unanticipated question for me, I guess. Did Goethe read him? Could he read Sanskrit, or did he read them? Were they translated into German at that time?
He didn't read Sanskrit, but he but he read the first translations were coming available to them in the 1700s and early 1800s. So
cool, very cool.
Yeah.
So David, I know you have an MA in Eastern Classics from St. John's, and so you've studied these all kinds of literature from the Eastern Sure, in depth. What would you say to, so for those of you who are considering the seminar, don't fear, David's going to provide a lot of support based on, his own studies and experience. But what would you say to someone who might be interested in the seminar, but thinks, well, I don't know anything about Indian classical drama or literature in Sanskrit? What would you say to them?
Yeah, it's an understandable reservation to have. About really anything that we're reading. But one of the things about Shakuntala that I think that I'd like people to know is that it's a love story. One of the greatest.
Everybody loves that.
Everybody loves a love story, and like all great love stories, or popular love stories like telenovelas, for example, which is a kind of soap opera that a lot of people here in San Antonio love. Really fundamentally deals with the conflict you find in the greatest love stories, the conflict between love and law, or love and duty. I mean, there's always that conflict in Shakespeare's plays as well. There's no love story without the conflict that arises that has something to do with duty or obligation or law. And we find the same thing in Shakuntala. And so that's one of the things I learned that was very eye-opening in studying the Eastern classics from India, from China, and from Japan. The literature, the philosophy, no matter what kind of text, religion, poetry, that they are themselves working through the great human fundamental problems, the questions that we have as human beings that arise from our experience, that come out of conflicts, no matter where we are and what culture we're involved in or what kind of language we speak. There are these problems, in particular this problem, the problem of love, of someone who falls in love with someone else and somehow it's beyond the lines of what is appropriate. And what are the consequences? How are those consequences played out? What happens as a result? And Shakuntala deals exactly with those. So there's a way in which we have, to the extent that all human beings are familiar with love and the conflicts of love, we have everything we need to get underway and read the stories of Shakuntala, both in the Mahabharata and Kalidasa, right? And so that's kind of the main response that I have for this person is that invitation to read. You have everything that you need to get underway with this. And besides, anything that we would read about Indian drama and poetry will mention Kalidasa, right? And they'll probably describe this play in particular that we'll be reading. And so, my response is to that, or my thinking through that, is to always remember what Leonardo da Vinci said when he said in his notebooks, why go to the water jar when you can go to the source? If we can have the direct experience of the source itself, why think that we have to depend on the secondary source when if you are interested at all in something a little different, something that also speaks to these fundamental problems of love, then there's no greater place to be introduced to something like Indian drama than actually reading the drama itself, reading the play itself, rather. So, and there's one other thing too that
sure, go ahead.
I was thinking about. I've been thinking about this a lot as I'm preparing for the class. It's something that's easy to overlook. It's easy to be intimidated by say Indian literature because it's such a foreign language. Sanskrit is something that very few people on earth here in the Western world really understand. And it takes a tremendous amount of work to even get a little bit underway in the Sanskrit language. But it's easy to forget that Sanskrit is an Indo-European language, just like Greek and Latin. And there are deep commonalities, in our languages. For example, mortality, the word mortality, which has its Latin root, it's in Latin with the M-O-R-T. The Sanskrit word for death is an M-R-T, mert, right? And so there's that relationship, right? And words like yoke and yoga, right? When Christ says something about how his yoke is easy or something like that, right? And the yoke, that word yoke, is also the Sanskrit word yoga has that same root word yug, right? And so, I mean, I just wanted to put that in there too, in the mix, that actually there may be a way in which, our deepest learning experience and going into this literature, which on the face of it seems very foreign, actually will strike us as deeply familiar in certain ways, right? And that's one of the exciting parts of the learning adventure, is to find, I think, deep similarities and samenesses in otherwise profound differences.
Right. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, David.
Absolutely. You're welcome.
Yeah,
Really
and
excited.
yeah, it's gonna be a really lovely seminar. It's been some time since we have read Indian classical poetry together at Classical Pursuits. So everyone, I really encourage you. As David said, you have all you need. You have all you need. And I really encourage you to sign up for our seminar, which starts on November 8th at this same time, which would be noon Eastern, 10 Central, 9 Pacific. And we hope to see you there. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.